My daughter-in-law spent weeks calling me deadweight and trying to kick me out before her big investor meeting. Too bad she didn't know the old dinosaur investor she was about to pitch to was me, and that I had already decided her fate. Before we continue, please subscribe to the channel and let us know where you are listening in the comments. The afternoon sun streamed through Danny's living room windows as I kept my eyes closed, listening to Brittany Whitaker hold court at the kitchen island. 6 months since Martha passed. 6 months since I'd sold my downtown condo and moved in temporarily to help Danny after the 2020 layoffs hit his marketing firm. What was supposed to be a few weeks had stretched into half a year of me quietly covering groceries, utilities, and household expenses while they got back on their feet. $2,400 a month, never asking for gratitude or recognition. The pitch is next Tuesday. Brittany was saying to her gaggle of millennial entrepreneurs, their MacBooks and oat milk lattes scattered across my son's granite countertops. 8 months I've been trying to get a meeting with Venture Partners, LLC. 8 months. And finally, they agreed to see Ecolux. I adjusted my position slightly, keeping my breathing steady. At 70, I perfected the art of appearing invisible while remaining perfectly alert. For decades, as a forensic accountant had taught me that people revealed their true selves when they thought no one important was listening. That's huge, Britt, squealed Madison, a girl with pink hair who claimed to be disrupting the pet food industry. VP LLC only takes meetings with the top 1% of applicants. Their sustainable tech fund has $50 million in assets. I know, right? Brittany's voice carried that particular smugness she reserved for discussing her business ventures. My presentation is going to blow them away. Ecolux is exactly what conscious consumers want. Luxury goods that don't compromise values. Bamboo fiber handbags, recycled cashmere scarves, lab-grown leather shoes. All targeting affluent millennials who want to feel good about their purchases. Through my barely open eyelids, I watched her gesture dramatically, her freshly manicured nails catching the light. Danny had mentioned she'd spent $300 on those nails last week. Money that could have gone toward the mortgage payment I'd quietly covered. The only problem, she continued, lowering her voice conspiratorially, is the optics situation here. She glanced toward the living room where I lay motionless. Marvin's sweet, don't get me wrong, but he just watches Fox News all day and asks when dinner's ready. He wouldn't know innovation if it bit him. Honestly, having him around makes us look unprofessional. Her friends murmured sympathetic agreement. One of them, a young man with a man bun who apparently created artisanal cryptocurrency, chimed in with, "Totally. Investors want to see that you're serious, not running some kind of elder care situation." My chest tightened, not with hurt. I'd heard worse from corporate executives half my age, but with a familiar sense of amusement. These children had no idea what they were talking about. What they didn't know was that every Tuesday, I drove downtown in my press suit to attend meetings that would make their little startup dreams seem like lemonade stands. I mean, I love Danny's dad, Brittany continued, but I need this house to look professional next week. Maybe I can convince him to visit his brother or something, just during business hours. Danny appeared in the kitchen doorway, still in his wrinkled polo shirt from another unsuccessful job interview. My heart clenched seeing the exhaustion in his shoulders, the way he'd started hunching forward like he was carrying invisible weight. "Britt, Dad's been really helpful," he said quietly. "Maybe we shouldn't." "Babe, this is my career we're talking about." Brittany's voice carried that edge it got when Danny showed any independence. One meeting with VP LLC could change everything. I can't have potential investors thinking we're supporting deadweight. Deadweight. I almost smiled. If only she knew that tomorrow I had a conference call with Harrison Brooks and Victoria Chun about portfolio assessments, or that my encrypted phone currently held 3 unread messages from V. Capital. Partners regarding due diligence reports. "I just think," Danny started. "You think too much about other people's feelings," Brittany cut him off. "That's why you're still unemployed while I'm building a business empire." The kitchen fell silent, except for the artificial clinks of MacBook keyboards. I felt my son's humiliation from across the room, watch him retreat into himself the way he had as a child when neighborhood bullies picked on him for reading instead of playing sports. That settled it. I'd been content to let Brittany play house with her little startup fantasies, content to support Danny quietly while he figured out his next move. But watching her systematically destroy his confidence while dismissing me as a useless relic, that crossed a line. My phone buzzed softly against my leg. Another encrypted message from my Tuesday colleagues. These young entrepreneurs thought innovation belonged to their generation, thought wisdom was obsolete in the face of disruption. How quaint. Brittany was right about one thing. Next week's pitch would change everything. Just not in the way she imagined. I kept my eyes closed and let my breathing deepen, playing the role of the doddering old man who wouldn't know innovation if it bit him. But behind my relaxed facade, my mind was already working through the delicious possibilities. I'd let her have her little pitch meeting. She deserved to see just how much this old mooch knew about innovation. The next morning, Brittany launched what she called her house optimization strategy, with the enthusiasm of a military commander preparing for invasion. "Marvin," she announced over breakfast, not bothering to look up from her phone, "I'm going to need you to maybe visit the library during business hours this week. 9 to 6? I've got potential investors coming by for preliminary meetings, and I need the space to look professional." I paused with my coffee cup halfway to my lips. 9 to 6. Every day. Essentially banishing me from the home I was paying to maintain. "The library closes at 5 on weekdays," I said mildly. "Perfect. Then you can grab dinner somewhere after." She finally glanced up, flashing that practice smile she used on venture capitalists. "Think of it as your social time. You can read all those boring financial papers you love so much." Danny shifted uncomfortably in his chair. "Britt, maybe that's a bit what? Professional? Danny, this is how successful people operate." She turned back to me with patronizing patience. "Marvin, you understand, right? This is business." I nodded slowly. "Oh, I understand business quite well, dear." After breakfast, the real campaign began. I returned from my morning walk to find my reading glasses missing from the kitchen counter where I'd left them. When I asked Brittany, she claimed ignorance while reorganizing the living room to maximize natural light flow for video calls. My prescription bottles vanished from the bathroom counter, relocated to a grocery bag hidden in the hall closet. Just temporarily. Brittany explained when I found them. Medications make spaces look clinical. We want investors to see vitality, not maintenance. The dining room table, where I've been quietly handling my correspondence each morning, was stripped bare and transformed into what Brittany called her presentation staging area. My neat stack of financial newspapers, including the Wall Street Journal and Financial Times that I'd subscribed to for 30 years, disappeared entirely. "I threw out all that old man clutter," she told Danny when he asked about the papers. "Nobody reads physical newspapers anymore. It's all digital now." Danny found me later, looking sheepish. "Dad," she threw away your newspapers. "I'm sorry. She's just really stressed about this pitch." "It's fine, son." I patted his shoulder. "I can always get the news elsewhere." What Danny didn't know was that I've been corresponding with those newspapers' financial editors for 15 years, contributing anonymous analysis pieces about market trends and corporate accountability. What Brittany had thrown away included 3 letters from the Financial Times requesting my thoughts on sustainable technology investments, precisely the sector her little company was trying to enter. By Wednesday, my clothes had been bagged and moved to the garage, just temporarily. Brittany sang as she converted the guest closet into storage for her product samples. We need every inch of space to look intentional. I stood in the garage, looking at my pressed suits hanging from exposed rafters like abandoned hope. The irony wasn't lost on me that the same suits I wore to downtown meetings where multi-million-dollar decisions were made were now considered unfit for a suburban house. That afternoon, my phone rang while I was reorganizing my temporarily displaced belongings. The caller ID showed Victoria Chun, a name that would have made Brittany's startup-obsessed heart skip several beats. "Martin, darling." Victoria's crisp voice carried through the speaker. "I've finished the due diligence report on that sustainable luxury application. The financials are optimistic." "Overly optimistic?" I asked. stepping outside for privacy. Let's just say their projected market share assumes every millennial in America will buy 3 handbags annually. Victoria's laugh was dry. Harrison wants to discuss portfolio assessment strategies before Tuesday's meeting. Of course. Same time tomorrow. Perfect. Oh, and Martin? The applicant listed family connections in finance as a reference point. Any idea what that means? I glanced toward the house where Brittany was visible through the window, gesticulating wildly during what appeared to be another video call with investors. I believe she's referring to her father-in-law's pension fund. Victoria's pause spoke volumes. Her father-in-law's pension fund. Apparently, I'm quite the financial mastermind. Thursday brought Brittany's phone call with her business partner, conducted at full volume in the kitchen, while I sat in the living room pretending to watch television. Marcus, I can't have potential investors thinking we're supporting deadweight, she was saying. The optics are all wrong. We need to look like innovators, not a multi-generational charity case. Marcus apparently suggested something about family values, because Brittany's response was swift and cutting. Family values don't scale, Marcus. Venture capital does. That evening, Danny approached me with the expression of a man delivering bad news. Dad, about Tuesday's pitch meeting. Let me guess. I need to disappear entirely. She wants you to stay at Uncle Robert's for the day. She's worried about... He gestured helplessly. About me embarrassing her in front of the important investors. She's just really focused on this opportunity. She says it could change our lives. I looked at my son, intelligent, kind-hearted Danny, who'd been beaten down by months of unemployment and his wife's relentless ambition. Oh, I'm sure it will, son. I'm sure it will. Friday afternoon, my phone rang again. Harrison this time, his British accent unmistakable even through the encrypted connection. Martin, the preliminary assessment is complete. Shall we proceed with Tuesday's meeting as scheduled? Absolutely, I said, stepping onto the back patio. I'm quite looking forward to it. Brittany chose that moment to burst through the sliding door, her face flushed with excitement from another investor call. She caught the tail end of my conversation and froze. Portfolio assessments? She repeated, staring at my phone with growing concern. Grandpa, you need to be careful about those fake investment calls. Scammers target seniors with promises about portfolios and high returns. I looked at her earnest face, genuinely convinced she was protecting me from financial predators. Bless her heart. She thought she was protecting me from scammers. Thank you for the warning, dear, I said solemnly. I'll be very careful about who I trust with financial matters. She nodded, satisfied that she'd saved her elderly father-in-law from becoming another statistic. If only she knew that the scammers calling me controlled more investment capital than her entire industry had seen in the past decade. As she headed back inside to continue her preparations, I smiled at the sunset. For more days until Tuesday. For more days until Brittany discovered exactly who she'd been trying to erase from her perfect professional picture. Who indeed were Victoria and Harrison? She was about to find out. Tuesday morning arrived with the electric tension of a storm front moving in. I woke at 5:30, as I had every day for the past 40 years. But instead of my usual routine of coffee and financial papers, I was greeted by the sound of Brittany's manic preparations echoing through the house. Hair dryer, coffee grinder, phone calls to her team. The symphony of someone convinced this day would change everything. She wasn't wrong. Marvin, she called from the kitchen as I emerged from the guest room. I need you packed and gone by 8:30. The investors are coming at 10 for a preliminary walkthrough before the formal pitch. I found her in full battle dress, charcoal blazer, designer heels, and enough confidence to power a small city. Her laptop displayed a presentation titled Ecolux, Sustainable Luxury for the Conscious Consumer, with slides full of market projections that made my forensic accountant instincts twitch. Of course, dear, I said, pouring coffee into my travel mug. I wouldn't want to interfere with your big day. Good. And Marvin? She turned to face me fully, her expression somewhere between pleading and commanding. Just try not to exist today, okay? This is my career we're talking about. Everything I've worked for comes down to the next 8 hours. Danny appeared in the doorway, still in his pajamas, looking like a man watching his wife prepare for war. Britt, maybe that's a harsh way to... Danny, please. I need focus, not commentary. She dismissed it with a wave and returned to her checklist. Marvin, you have Uncle Robert's address, right? You'll stay there until I text you that it's safe to come home? I nodded and headed to pack my overnight bag, each folded shirt and carefully selected tie hiding a smile that threatened to break free. If only she knew where I was really going today. I love you, Dad, Danny said quietly as he helped me carry my bag to the car. Thanks for being so understanding. I kissed my son's forehead, remembering when he was 8 and I'd taught him to balance checkbooks with the same patience I'd used to unravel corporate fraud schemes. Take care of yourself today, son. And don't worry, everything's going to work out exactly as it should. The drive downtown took me through the familiar streets of my real life, the life Brittany couldn't imagine existed. For 40 years, I'd walked into gleaming office towers as Martin Whitaker, senior forensic accountant, the man corporations called when their numbers didn't add up, and their executives needed someone who could follow money trails through the darkest corporate labyrinths. My specialty had been simple. I could spot a lie in a spreadsheet from across a conference room. Market manipulation, creative accounting, inflated projections, phantom revenue streams. I'd seen every trick desperate entrepreneurs use to make their businesses appear more valuable than reality suggested. When I retired 3 years ago, Victoria Chun and Harrison Brooks had approached me with a proposition. Victoria, former chief technology officer at 3 Fortune 500 companies, had the technical expertise to evaluate innovation. Harrison, who'd spent 2 decades as a venture capital lawyer, understood the legal frameworks that made or broke startup investments. But they needed someone who could cut through the optimistic projections and identify which businesses had genuine sustainable value. Together, we'd formed Venture Partners LLC, $50 million in combined assets, specializing in sustainable technology investments. Our strategy was radical in its simplicity, complete anonymity, no social pressure, no networking events, no family connections influencing decisions, pure business assessment based on merit, market viability, and leadership competence. As the primary decision maker, I reviewed every application that made it to final consideration. My fraud detection instincts, honed by decades of corporate investigations, had saved the fund from several spectacular failures and guided us toward investments that were already showing impressive returns. The irony was exquisite. For 8 months, Brittany had been trying to get a meeting with Venture Partners LLC. Her application had crossed my desk in November, and I'd recognized her business model immediately. Sustainable luxury goods targeting affluent millennials with more money than market sense. Her pitch materials had been slick, professional, and full of the kind of optimistic projections that made my accountant soul weep. Market share assumptions that required every millennial in America to purchase 3 luxury handbags annually. Revenue projections that ignored competition, economic cycles, and basic consumer behavior patterns. But the detail that had made me pause wasn't inflated numbers. It was her reference to family connections in finance that gave Ecolux unique insights into investment strategies. She was referring to my pension fund. My pension fund, as if somehow being married to the son of a retired accountant provided insider knowledge of venture capital markets. The downtown office building that housed Venture Partners LLC was a monument to financial discretion. 30 floors of glass and steel, where serious money made serious decisions. I badged into the elevator with the familiarity of someone who belonged, adjusting my navy suit and straightening the tie that cost more than Brittany's monthly coffee budget. Victoria was already in the conference room when I arrived, her silver hair immaculate, reviewing files with the precision of someone who'd built her reputation on never being surprised by technical limitations. "Martin," she greeted me with a smile, "ready for today's entertainment?" Harrison looked up from his legal pad, his British accent adding gravity to everything he said. "I've reviewed the application materials one final time. The business model has potential, but the financial projections are fantastical," I suggested, settling into my chair at the head of the mahogany table. I was going to say optimistic, but fantastical works. He slid the Ecolux folder across to me. "The applicant will be here at 2 o'clock for final consideration." I opened the folder and reviewed Brittany's materials one last time. Professional headshots, market research, product samples, letters of intent from potential retail partners. She'd done her homework in every area except the one that mattered most: honest financial assessment. Gentlemen, I said, settling back in my leather chair's Whitaker, senior partner, I believe we're about to have a very educational afternoon. The conference room fell quiet except for the whisper of air conditioning and the distant hum of serious money being managed 30 floors below us. In 3 hours, Brittany would walk through that door expecting to meet the anonymous investors who could change her life. She had no idea how right she was. At 1:58 p.m., the elevator chimed with the precision of destiny, arriving exactly on schedule. Through the conference room's glass walls, I watched Brittany emerge into the reception area like a conquering general entering occupied territory. Her power suit was immaculate. Her presentation materials organized in a leather portfolio that probably cost more than most people's rent. Danny trailed behind her, clearly uncomfortable in his borrowed blazer, looking like moral support that wasn't entirely convinced of the cause he was supporting. Brittany Whitaker for the 2 o'clock appointment. She announced to the receptionist with the kind of confidence that comes from never doubting you belong in the room you're entering. Victoria glanced at me with barely concealed amusement. "Showtime," she murmured. "Remember," I said quietly, "we evaluate businesses, not personalities. Let's see what she's actually built." The receptionist led them down the hallway, and I could hear Brittany's heels clicking against marble with the rhythm of someone who thought victory was inevitable. She was gesturing animatedly to Danny, probably delivering last-minute strategy updates and reminders about how this meeting would change everything. The conference room door opened. "Ms. Whitaker," the receptionist announced, "the partners will see you now." Brittany strode into the room with her head high and her presentation smile locked in place. Danny followed more cautiously, taking the mahogany table, the floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city, the subtle indicators that serious money lived in spaces like this. Then Brittany's gaze reached the head of the table, and her entire world tilted off its axis. "Marvin," the word came out as barely a whisper. "What are you doing here? Did you get lost?" I stood slowly, adjusting my tie with the deliberate precision of someone who had attended thousands of business meetings in rooms exactly like this one. "Ms. Whitaker, I'm Whitaker, senior partner at Venture Partners, LLC. Please have a seat." The silence that followed could have been measured in geological time. Brittany's mouth opened and closed like a fish pulled from water. Danny's expression shifted from confusion to dawning recognition to something approaching awe. I could practically see the mental calculations run behind his eyes. Every Tuesday appointment, every encrypted phone call, every time I'd mentioned staying busy after retirement. But you said your name was Whitaker," Brittany stammered. "Martin Whitaker, actually, but my family calls me Marvin." Victoria stepped forward with the grace of someone accustomed to managing shocked entrepreneurs. "I'm Victoria Chun, technology partner. We spoke briefly during your application process." Harrison rose from his chair with British formality. "Harrison Brooks, legal and compliance. Pleasure to meet you both properly." Brittany's recovery attempt was like watching someone try to restart a car with a dead battery. Lots of effort. No actual momentum. "Marvin, I had no idea. Wow, what a coincidence. I mean, what are the odds?" "Actually, Ms. Whitaker, there are no coincidences in venture capital," I said, settling back into my chair. "Shall we proceed with your presentation?" What followed was 45 minutes of watching someone's confidence disintegrate in real time. Brittany's polished presentation, clearly rehearsed to perfection, became a stumbling exercise in damage control. Every slide that seemed brilliant in her kitchen now fell hollow under the gaze of the man she'd spent 2 weeks trying to erase from existence. "Ecolux targets the conscious luxury market," she began, her voice noticeably higher than usual. "Millennials with disposable income who want to feel good about their purchases." "Interesting," I said, making notes. "Can you walk us through your target market analysis? Specifically, how did you calculate market penetration rates?" She fumbled through slides, clearly not expecting detailed questions about the mathematics behind her projections. Well, we're targeting the top 15% of millennial earners, and we assume roughly 20% adoption in the first year. 20%? Victoria leaned forward. That would require every target consumer to purchase multiple items annually. What's your basis for that assumption? Market research shows that conscious consumers are willing to pay premium prices for sustainable goods. Brittany replied, throwing around buzzwords like life preservers. I pulled up her financial projections on my tablet. Ms. Whitaker, your cash flow analysis assumes 60% gross margins. In sustainable manufacturing, those margins typically run between 20 and 30%. How do you account for this discrepancy? Well, our suppliers offer competitive pricing because they believe in our mission. About those suppliers, I interrupted gently. I took the liberty of researching your vendor list. Your bamboo fiber supplier sources from 3 factories in Southeast Asia, none of which maintain sustainable certification. Your lab-grown leather comes from a company currently facing EPA violations for chemical discharge. The color drained from Brittany's face. There might be some outdated information in our vendor database. Harrison consulted his notes. Your marketing budget allocates 60% to influencer partnerships. Can you elaborate on the ROI metrics for paying Instagram models to pose with handbags? Influencer marketing is crucial for brand awareness in our demographic, she said desperately. Young consumers trust peer recommendations over traditional advertising. Peer recommendations, I repeated slowly. Are Instagram models who've never purchased your products technically peers of your target consumers? Danny, who had been silent through this entire exchange, was staring at me with an expression I remembered from his childhood. The look he got when he realized I knew far more about something than he'd ever imagined. As the meeting continued, Brittany's desperation became palpable. Her answers grew more frantic, her buzzwords more frequent, her attempts to redirect attention more obvious. Finally, with her presentation in ruins around her, she played her last card. But Marvin, she said, abandoning all pretense of professionalism, we're family. You have to support family businesses. This is Danny's future, too. I set down my pen and looked at her directly. Ms. Whitaker, that's exactly why we maintain anonymous partnerships. Personal relationships can cloud business judgment. Today's evaluation has been based solely on the merits of your business proposal. The conference room fell silent except for the whisper of air conditioning and the distant sounds of city that continued functioning while someone's world collapsed 30 floors above the street. Victoria and Harrison exchanged glances. Danny looked like he was seeing his father for the first time. And Brittany? Brittany looked like someone who just realized she'd been playing chess with a grandmaster while thinking it was checkers. After Brittany and Danny left, she was shaking hands. He would bewildered glances over his shoulder. The conference room settled into the kind of quiet that follows earthquakes. Victoria was the first to speak. Well, that was illuminating. Harrison poured himself water from the crystal pitcher, his movements deliberate as always. I've seen desperate pitches before, but that was something else entirely. I remained seated at the head of the table, reviewing my notes from the meeting. 43 years of evaluating businesses had taught me to separate emotion from analysis, but today's evaluation carried weight beyond simple financial metrics. Let's discuss, I said. Business assessment first, then we'll address the elephant in the room. Victoria consulted her tablet. The technology claims are largely unsupported. Sustainable manufacturing at the scale she's proposing would require supply chain partnerships that simply don't exist in the luxury goods sector. Her vendor research is surface level at best. The financial projections are fantasy, Harrison added. Market penetration assumptions that ignore competition, gross margins that ignore manufacturing realities, and a cash flow model that assumes exponential growth with no market adjustment periods. I nodded. The business model is fundamentally unsound, but that's not why we're rejecting it. Both partners looked at me expectantly. Victoria, you built teams at 3 Fortune 500 companies. What did you observe about her leadership style? Victoria's expression grew thoughtful. She showed no respect for experience or wisdom. That's a leadership red flag. Any CEO who dismisses counsel from people with decades of industry knowledge will make catastrophic decisions when the market shifts. Harrison, anyone who treats family with such dismissal will destroy employee morale, he said without hesitation. If she can't maintain basic respect for someone supporting her household, how will she handle investor disagreements or board oversight? I leaned back in my chair. She called me a mooch. To my face. In my own son's house. While I was paying their mortgage, utilities, and groceries. The words came out calmly, but Victoria and Harrison both stiffened. Good Lord, Harrison muttered. The decision is unanimous then, Victoria said. Rejection based on leadership concerns and operational feasibility issues. I'll write the rejection letter personally, I said, already composing the language in my head. Harrison raised an eyebrow. That's unusual for you, Martin. This is an unusual situation. The drive home took 45 minutes through Seattle traffic, giving me plenty of time to savor the crafted phrases I'd included in Brittany's rejection letter. Professional language that would burn precisely where intended. Concerns about long-term stability, questions about respecting elder counsel, and observations about questionable family dynamics affecting business judgment. Danny was uncharacteristically quiet in the passenger seat, occasionally glancing at me like I was a puzzle he couldn't solve. Dad, he finally said as we reached the suburbs, why didn't you tell us? How long have you been doing this? 3 years. I started the fund to stay intellectually active after your mother passed. Retirement didn't suit me. But the money involved, $50 million? Your mother and I lived below our means for 40 years, son. Compound interest and conservative investments add up over time. Why didn't you want special treatment? I considered this carefully. Because special treatment corrupts judgment. When family members expect business favors, both the business and the family suffer. I wanted Brittany's application evaluated on its merits. And it had none. We pulled into the driveway to find Brittany pacing the front porch with a bottle of champagne and an expression of barely contained excitement. She'd changed into a cocktail dress, clearly expecting celebration. There they are, she called out, practically bouncing on her designer heels. I was starting to worry. How did Uncle Robert's house treat you, Marvin? I hope you weren't too bored. I climbed out of the car slowly, keeping my expression neutral. Oh, I found ways to stay occupied. I'm sure I nailed it, she continued, popping the champagne cork with theatrical flair. They seemed really interested, especially the older gentleman. He was taking so many notes. Danny shot me a look that was equal parts amusement and disbelief. Oh, yes, I said gravely. I'm sure he was taking notes. Brittany poured 3 glasses, practically vibrating with confidence. The way he asked all those detailed questions, you could tell he was impressed by how thoroughly I'd researched everything. And when I mentioned our family connections in finance, his whole demeanor changed. Changed how? Danny asked. He got this look, like he finally understood the full picture. Very professional, very focused. These old-school investors love traditional family values. I accepted the champagne glass and took a careful sip. Traditional family values are certainly important in business. Exactly. I could tell he respected that we take care of our elders, even when it's challenging. She paused, apparently realizing how that sounded. I mean, not that you're challenging, Marvin, just that having 3 generations under one roof shows stability. Stability, I repeated thoughtfully. Yes, I imagine that made quite an impression. The next morning, I was reading the financial section, delivered to Danny's neighbor's house, and retrieved during my morning walk, when Brittany's phone chimed with the email notification that would change everything. Her scream could have shattered windows. Rejected? The word echoed through the house like a battle cry of the defeated. They rejected Ecolux. After everything. Danny and I both hurried to the kitchen, where Brittany stood staring at her phone screen with the expression of someone watching their dreams burn. What did they say? Danny asked gently. Leadership concerns, she read, her voice hollow. Questionable family dynamics. Insufficient respect for elder counsel. What does that even mean? I poured coffee with steady hands. Perhaps they felt your management style needed development. It must have been that older investor, she said, pacing frantically. He probably doesn't understand our generation's approach to business. These traditional VCs are so stuck in the past. Or perhaps, I suggested mildly, he understood it better than you think, dear. Brittany whirled to face me, her eyes blazing with frustration. What would you know about it, Marvin? No offense, but you're not exactly plugged into the startup world. I took a long sip of my coffee and smiled. No offense taken. As she stormed out to call her business partner and dissect every moment of yesterday's meeting, Danny lingered in the kitchen. Dad, he said quietly, are you going to tell her? I considered this question while watching my daughter-in-law through the window, gesticulating wildly as she explained to Marcus why their rejection was clearly the result of age discrimination and old-fashioned thinking. I'm not sure she's ready to learn, I said finally. But don't worry, son. The lesson isn't over yet. The week following Brittany's rejection was like watching someone slowly lose their grip on reality, one bitter comment at a time. It's unconscionable, she declared over breakfast Wednesday morning, stabbing her avocado toast with unnecessary violence. These old-fashioned investors with their outdated business practices are killing innovation. They probably still use flip phones and think social media is a fad. Danny winced. I continued reading my newspaper, now delivered to neighbors' mailbox each morning, thanks to Brittany's earlier house-cleaning efforts. The whole system is rigged against young entrepreneurs, she continued. They want us to grovel and play by rules that were written when people wore suits to baseball games. The older investor did seem very traditional. Danny offered carefully. Traditional? Brittany laughed bitterly. He was practically ancient. Probably made his money in coal mines or something equally prehistoric. The way he questioned every innovative aspect of our business model. It's like he'd never heard of disruption theory. I turned a page of the financial section, noting that one of our portfolio companies had just announced a successful Series B funding round. Sustainable technology, as it happened. The kind of genuine innovation that came from understanding both market realities and environmental science. By Friday, Brittany's blame had crystallized into a familiar target. Maybe if certain people weren't making us look like a charity case, she said to Danny while I sat in the living room, apparently absorbed in television. Investors want to see successful, independent entrepreneurs, not people running multi-generational welfare programs. Danny's discomfort was becoming painful to watch. Britt, Dad's been really helpful. The rejection probably had nothing to do with. Everything has to do with image, Danny. Everything. Her voice carried that sharp edge I'd learned meant she was about to say something particularly cutting. We need to pivot our image. No more looking like we're supporting dead weight. Dead weight. Again. Saturday morning brought the ultimatum I'd been expecting since Tuesday's champagne debacle. Danny, we need to talk. Brittany's voice carried the authority of someone delivering non-negotiable terms. Your father needs to find his own place. This arrangement isn't working. I was in the kitchen, ostensibly making coffee. But their conversation in the living room carried clearly through the open floor plan Danny had been so proud of when they bought the house. Britt, that seems harsh. The rejection wasn't Dad's fault. Wasn't it? Think about the optics, Danny. Successful entrepreneurs don't live with their unemployed husbands' elderly fathers. It sends a wrong message about our priorities and capabilities. He's been paying for everything, which makes it worse. It looks like we can't support ourselves without charity from a retiree. How is that attractive to investors? Danny's silence stretched long enough that I could imagine him processing the full cruelty of her logic. I've already identified several senior living communities with excellent amenities, Brittany continued. Your father would probably be happier around people his own age anyway. That settled it. I'd given her the chance to be gracious in defeat, to learn from the rejection and perhaps grow from the experience. She'd chosen spite instead. Worse, she was now actively trying to destroy my relationship with my son to protect her own wounded ego. Time for the final lesson. Danny, Brittany, I called from the kitchen. How would you feel about dinner at the country club tomorrow night? My treat, of course. The silence that followed was profound. The country club? Brittany's voice had shifted from commanding to curious. Which country club? Rainier Club downtown. I thought it might be nice to have a proper dinner out. You've both been under such stress lately. Brittany appeared in the kitchen doorway, her expression carefully neutral. The Rainier Club was exactly the kind of exclusive venue she'd always wanted to experience. Old money, established connections, the kind of place where real power lunched on Sundays. That's very generous, Marvin. Are you sure you can get reservations on such short notice? Oh, I'm sure they can accommodate us. I smiled. Why don't you invite your friends? Madison Marcus, that young man with the cryptocurrency business? The more the merrier. Her eyes lit up with possibilities. I could practically see calculating behind them. Free dinner at an exclusive venue. Networking opportunities. A chance to show off her connections to Seattle's business elite. That's actually a wonderful idea, she said slowly. Are you sure you don't mind paying for everyone? Consider it my contribution to your networking efforts. While Brittany immediately began texting invitations, I retreated to the guest room to make my own preparations. The first call was to Victoria. Martin, what can I do for you? Are you and Harrison free tomorrow evening for dinner at the Rainier Club? I'm hosting a small gathering, and I think you'd find conversation educational. Victoria's pause was loaded with understanding. Should I assume this involves our recent applicant? You should assume she needs to learn that actions have consequences. We'll be there. The second call was to my financial advisor, asking him to email me the portfolio summary I'd been meaning to request. Specifically, the one with photograph from my retirement dinner 3 years ago, 40 years with Morrison, Chin & Associates, honor for pioneering work in business innovation consulting. The photos told quite a story. Me accepting awards, shaking hands with tech CEOs whose companies I help evaluate for acquisition, being toasted by colleagues who'd gone on to run major consulting firms. 40 years of expertise that Brittany had dismissed as watching Fox News and asking when dinner was ready. I printed the Venture Partners LLC team photo. Victoria, Harrison, and myself at our fund announcement. Professional headshots with our credentials listed below. Then I slipped it into my jacket pocket and waited. Brittany's phone call to her friends was audible from across the house. You guys have to come. Marvin's taking us to the Rainier Club. You know, the place where all the old Seattle money hangs out? It's exactly the kind of networking opportunity we need after this week's disaster. What? No, of course he can afford it. He's been living off his pension for years. He probably has savings. I know, right? Finally, the old man is useful for something. Danny found me in the living room afterward, looking troubled. Dad, are you sure about this dinner? Britt seems really excited about the networking angle. I'm sure she is, son. What are you planning? I looked at my boy, intelligent, kind-hearted Danny who'd been caught in the middle of a situation he didn't fully understand. Tomorrow night, he'd understand everything. I'm planning to give your wife exactly what she's been asking for, I said. The truth about innovation, business expertise, and what real networking looks like. Danny frowned. That sounds ominous. Does it? I smiled and returned to my newspaper. I think it sounds educational. As I read about market trends and sustainable technology investments, I could hear Brittany in the kitchen, already planning tomorrow's outfit, and researching the other members of the Rainier Club online. She was probably imagining the connections she'd make, the business cards she'd collect, the way she'd finally show everyone that Brittany Whitaker belonged in rooms where serious money made serious decisions. She had no idea she was about to discover that the most serious money in that room had been watching her very, very carefully. One more day. The Rainier Club's dining room was a temple to old Seattle money, all dark with paneling and crystal chandeliers that had witnessed decades of handshake deals worth more than most people's annual salaries. Brittany and her startup friends entered like pilgrims visiting sacred ground, their eyes wide as they took in the oil paintings of long-dead lumber barons and the quiet conversations happening at tables where billion-dollar decisions were made over 20-year-old scotch. This place is incredible, Madison whispered, clutching her designer handbag like a security blanket. How did you get reservations, Marvin? Oh, I've been a member for quite a few years, I said casually, guiding them to our reserved table by the windows overlooking Elliott Bay. The salmon here is exceptional. I recommend the wine pairing. Brittany had outdone herself for the occasion. A black cocktail dress that probably cost more than my monthly utilities, jewelry that caught the light with every gesture, and an expression that barely contained excitement at finally gaining access to the kind of venue where she believed real networking happened. Everyone, this is Danny's father, she announced at the table with the practiced smile of someone introducing a moderately interesting piece of furniture. He's retired. Marvin Whitaker, I said, standing to shake hands with her friends. Pleasure to meet you all properly. Marcus, her business partner, managed a polite nod. Thanks for hosting, Mr. Whitaker. This place has quite a reputation. 40 years of excellent service. I agreed, settling into my chair. The consistency is remarkable. As dinner progressed, I played the role of gracious host with the expertise of someone who'd attended hundreds of business dinners in rooms exactly like this one. I ordered wine that impressed the sommelier, shared carefully edited stories about the old days of Seattle business, and asked polite questions about their various entrepreneurial endeavors. The young man with the cryptocurrency venture, Trevor, I learned, was particularly eager to explain how blockchain technology would revolutionize everything from coffee purchases to international diplomacy. Traditional financial institutions just don't understand the disruptive potential, he declared, gesturing with his wine glass. They're too invested in legacy systems to embrace innovation. I murmured, refilling his glass. Change can be challenging for established institutions. As the evening wore on and the wine loosened tongues, the conversation inevitably turned to recent disappointments. Speaking of traditional institutions that don't understand innovation, Brittany said, her voice carrying the bitter edge that had become familiar over the past week, we just had the most frustrating experience with venture capital investing. Oh, I leaned forward with interested concern. What happened? Some old dinosaur adventure partners rejected our pitch because we weren't traditional enough. She made air quotes around the word traditional, like it was something distasteful. 8 months of work, and they dismissed everything because we don't fit their outdated business model expectations. Her friends murmured sympathetic agreement. Madison rolled her eyes. Traditional VCs are the worst. They want everything to fit into their boring little boxes. What kind of questions did they ask, dear? I inquired gently. Brittany launched into a mocking impression that made my chest tighten with anticipation. Oh, they want to know about cash flow and market research. So boring. Like, how did you calculate market penetration rates? And what's your basis for these margin assumptions? They completely miss the innovative aspects of sustainable luxury. The lead investor was particularly awful, Marcus added. This ancient guy who clearly hadn't updated his thinking since the 1980s. He actually questioned our Instagram marketing strategy. Trevor nodded vigorously. Traditional VCs are so stuck in the past. They don't get disruption theory or how millennial consumers think. The worst part, Brittany continued, warming to her theme, was how condescending he was. Like he thought we were children who didn't understand business fundamentals. The whole meeting felt like being lectured by someone's grandfather about the way things used to be done. I checked my watch. Perfect timing. Well, I said, standing slowly, I think I see some colleagues I'd like you all to meet. If you'll excuse me for just a moment. I walked to the entrance where Victoria and Harrison were checking their coats, their professional attire impeccable as always. Victoria wore the kind of understated elegance that came from decades of moving through rooms like this one, while Harrison's British formality commanded immediate respect from the club staff. Victoria, Harrison, I called out warmly, loud enough for our table to hear. Perfect timing. They joined me with smiles that didn't quite reach their eyes, the expression of people who knew exactly what performance was about to unfold. As we approached the table, I could see Brittany's confusion beginning to crystallize into something approaching panic. Her friends looked curious but unaware, while Danny's expression suggested he was starting to connect dots he'd been missing for weeks. Everyone, I said, settling back into my chair, I'd like you to meet my dear colleagues, Victoria Chun and Harrison Brooks. Victoria extended her hand graciously. Lovely to meet you all. Martin speaks of his family so fondly. Victoria is our technology partner. I continued casually. And Harrison handles legal and compliance. We work together at Venture Partners, LLC. The silence that followed could have been measured in geological epochs. Brittany's wine glass stopped halfway to her lips. Marcus's fork clattered against his plate. Madison made a small choking sound that might have been surprise, or wine going down the wrong pipe. Everyone. Victoria continued with the smooth professionalism of someone who delivered countless presentation introductions. This is our senior partner at Venture Partners, LLC. I reached into my jacket pocket and withdrew the team photo, sliding it across the white tablecloth with the careful precision of someone revealing the winning hand in a high-stakes poker game. Brittany stared at the photo like it was written in a foreign language. 3 professional headshots, 3 names, 3 sets of credentials that spelled out exactly who had been sitting in that conference room on Tuesday afternoon. You, she whispered, her face draining of color faster than champagne from a broken bottle. You're the investors? But you said your name was M. Whitaker. Martin Whitaker. Actually, I corrected gently, but my family calls me Marvin. The table had fallen into the kind of silence that follows explosions, shocked, complete, and filled with the sound of assumptions crashing to the ground. Trevor stared at the photo, then at me, then back at the photo. You're the VC fund that rejected Ecolux. We evaluated the application according to our standard criteria. Harrison said with British precision. Our assessment was thorough and unanimous. Brittany's desperate damage control began immediately. I didn't mean when I was talking about the meeting. That wasn't about you specifically. Actually, Ms. Whitaker, Harrison observed with the clinical detachment of someone reading from court records, your exact words were quite memorable. Something about ancient investors and outdated business practices, if I recall correctly. Victoria consulted her phone with the precision of someone who kept detailed notes. And the phrase boring traditional questions about cash flow and market research. That was particularly illuminating regarding your business preparation methodology. The startup friends were beginning to realize they were witnessing something far more significant than a simple dinner party revelation. Madison had her phone out, probably calculating whether this moment was worth documenting for social media. Trevor looked like someone watching a car accident in slow motion. And Brittany looked like someone who just realized she'd been playing chess with grandmasters while thinking it was checkers, and that every move she'd made had been anticipated 3 plays in advance. Danny was staring at me with an expression I hadn't seen since he discovered I knew calculus well enough to help with his high school homework. The evening was far from over. What followed was 47 minutes of watching someone's entire worldview collapse in real time, broadcast live to a dinner table of witnesses who will be telling this story for years. Brittany's meltdown began with accusations. This is a setup. You deliberately deceived us. You let me walk into that meeting knowing who you were. Ms. Whitaker, I said calmly, you applied to our fund 8 months ago. We maintained our standard anonymous evaluation process. Nothing about Tuesday's meeting was deceptive. But you knew. You sat there and let me talk about cash flow and market research like they were stupid questions. Victoria's eyebrow arched with clinical precision. Those were standard business assessment queries. Your dismissal of fundamental financial analysis was illuminating. This isn't fair. Brittany's voice cracked with desperation. But we're family. You can't reject family. There are rules about this kind of thing. I set down my wine glass and looked at her directly. Ms. Whitaker, you said I wouldn't know innovation if it bit me. You were wrong about that too. The words landed like physical blows. Around the table, her startup friend sat frozen in various states of shock and fascination. Madison had her phone out, clearly recording. Trevor looked like someone watching a nature documentary about apex predators. We've reviewed your application again. Victoria said with the finality of a judge delivering a verdict. Our decision stands. Ecolux does not meet our investment criteria for leadership, financial planning, or market viability. You can't do this. Brittany stood so abruptly her chair scraped against the hardwood floor. I'll sue. This is discrimination. You can't mix personal and business relationships like this. Harrison's response carried the weight of 2 decades in venture capital law. Ms. Whitaker, everything was recorded and completely professional. Your own words are documented in our meeting notes. You're welcome to review them with your attorney. That's when Madison made the decision that would haunt Brittany for months to come. She hit post on her Instagram story. The video was 23 seconds of pure social media gold. Brittany screaming about discrimination, while Marvin sat calmly, explaining that he was a senior partner she'd been calling an old dinosaur for the past week. Madison's caption was perfect in its simplicity. When you find out your boyfriend's dad is the VC who rejected your startup grimacing face, #starpitch, #family drama, #awkward. Within an hour, it had been reshared 400 times. By morning, #starpitch and #family drama were trending across social platforms, with thousands of comments dissecting every moment of Brittany's public humiliation. Danny, who had been silent through the entire explosion, finally found his voice. "Dad, I had no idea you were still. I thought you just played golf. I wanted to stay busy after your mother passed," I explained, reaching across to squeeze his hand. "Helping young entrepreneurs seemed meaningful. Your mother always said I was happiest when I was solving puzzles. But $50 million? A venture capital fund? 40 years of compound interest and conservative investments. Son, your mother and I live below our means, so we could do something meaningful in retirement." Brittany made one final desperate play. "Danny, you have to choose. Either your father apologizes and invests in Ecolux, or I'm done. I can't be married to someone whose family sabotages my career." The silence that followed was profound. Danny looked at his wife, then at me, then back at his wife. 3 years of marriage, 8 months of unemployment, 6 months of watching his father quietly support their household while being treated like an inconvenience. "Dad's staying," he said quietly. "You can find your own place." "What?" "You heard me. Dad's staying. This is his house now. He's been paying for everything anyway. You can find your own place." Brittany's final exit was as dramatic as everything else about the evening. She grabbed her purse, knocked over her wine glass, and stormed out of Rainier Club with the kind of theatrical flair that ensured every member present would remember the scene for decades. Her startup friends followed in various states of embarrassment and fascination, already composing the social media posts that would cement the story in Seattle entrepreneurial legend. 6 months later, Danny had a new job at Verdant Technologies, one of our portfolio companies specializing in sustainable urban planning software. He'd found his calling working with environmental engineers who appreciated both innovation and practical implementation. His divorce was finalized on a Tuesday, the same day of the week as our original pitch meeting, which seemed poetically appropriate. Brittany's fate was less glamorous. After the social media explosion destroyed her reputation in Seattle's startup community, she'd taken a position at a digital marketing agency in Portland. No more Ecolux, no more venture capital dreams, no more dismissing people as deadweight who turned out to control more investment capital than she'd see in several lifetimes. The irony wasn't lost on me that she was now creating Instagram content for other people's businesses instead of building her own. "Do you ever regret it?" Danny asked one evening as we shared dinner in his kitchen. Properly his kitchen now, since I transferred the deed to him as an early inheritance gift. "Regret what, son?" "Not telling her earlier. Maybe if she'd known who you really were." I considered this while cutting my salmon. The same variety we'd serve at the Rainier Club that night, though this came from Pike Place Market rather than an exclusive dining room. Some people think wisdom comes with age. I said finally, others learn it the hard way. I gave her every opportunity to treat people with respect and learn from her mistakes. She chose a different path. "She still calls sometimes," Danny admitted, asking if you might reconsider the investment. Apparently, she's had trouble finding funding anywhere else. I smiled, thinking of the financial newspapers that once again graced our morning table, the encrypted phone that still buzzed with calls from Victoria and Harrison about new investment opportunities, and the quiet satisfaction of helping genuine innovators build sustainable businesses. I never did hear back from her about those investment opportunities. I mused. Funny how that works. through the kitchen window. I could see the garden Danny had started planting. Vegetables and herbs, practical things that would grow slowly and steadily with proper care and attention. Much like good investments, sound businesses, and healthy family relationships. Some lessons, it seemed, were best learned the hard way. Others were worth waiting 70 years to teach properly. And some old mooches, as it turned out, really did know a thing or two about innovation after all. If you enjoyed this story, please like this video, subscribe to the channel, and share your opinions of this story in the comments. To listen to more stories, click on one of the boxes showing on your screen. Thank you for watching.